The cave was supposed to be empty. That's what the team expected when they descended into the limestone corridor in southeastern Turkey, not far from the ancient site of Göbekli Tepe. Routine survey work, standard documentation, nothing unusual on the ground-penetrating radar, or so they thought. Then a junior archaeologist crouched down. She saw something embedded in the wall, not carved into it, not painted on it, embedded, as if placed deliberately inside the stone itself, during a time when the stone was still forming. She called the team over. Nobody said anything for a long moment. Then the lead researcher said 4 words that would quietly ripple through academic circles for the next 2 years. He said, "That shouldn't be here." And he was right.
Look at this.
What they found inside that cave, sealed beneath 12,000 years of geological time, has no official name yet. Some researchers call it a mechanism. Some call it a record-keeping system. One physicist, speaking off the record, called it something that stopped the entire conversation cold. He called it a thinking device. And here is the question that nobody in the room that day could answer. A question that, once you hear it, you cannot unhear. If human civilization, as we define it, only began around 5,000 years ago, then who built this? And more importantly, why does it work? Let's go back to the beginning. Not the beginning of this discovery, the beginning of what we think we know. For most of the 20th century, the story of human intelligence had a clean, comfortable arc. Primitive man, stone tools, fire, agriculture, cities, writing, complexity, progress. The timeline moved in one direction, and it moved slowly. 12,000 years ago, according to every major textbook, human beings were hunter-gatherers. They followed animals. They lived in small bands. They did not build. They did not calculate. They survived. That was the consensus. Comfortable. Neat. Widely taught. Then, in 1994, a Kurdish shepherd stumbled across the carved tops of enormous stone pillars jutting out of a hillside in Turkey. What archaeologists eventually uncovered beneath that hillside shattered the timeline so completely that even now, 30 years later, the field has not fully recovered. Gobekli Tepe, a massive, engineered, symbolically sophisticated ritual complex built at least 11,600 years ago, before agriculture, before pottery, before any civilization was supposed to exist. The discovery forced a painful question onto the table. If our ancestors were capable of organizing hundreds of workers, engineering massive limestone pillars, and creating symbolic artwork at that scale, what else were they capable of that we haven't found yet? That question has been sitting in the background of archaeology ever since. Politely ignored at conferences, quietly shelved in favor of safer research, but it never went away. And now, with what was found in that cave, it has come back with enormous force. The object, and calling it an object feels almost inadequate, is approximately the size of a large dining table, though its shape is irregular, closer to an elongated oval. It is made from a composite of materials that initial analysis has struggled to fully classify. There is stone, yes, but embedded within the stone are arrangements of what appear to be crystalline structures, organized in patterns that repeat with mathematical precision across the entire surface. That alone would be unusual. Crystals occur naturally in stone, but they do not organize themselves into repeating geometric sequences. They do not align with each other across distances of half a meter with sub-millimeter accuracy. And they certainly do not, under any natural process, arrange themselves into what researchers have now confirmed are nested numerical systems. Officially, the site is being described as a ritualistic arrangement of natural materials with possible symbolic significance. That is the language released to the public. That is what the press release says. But here's what makes this strange. 3 of the researchers involved in the initial analysis have independently used a different word in private correspondence, in conference calls, and in at least one draft paper that was submitted and then quietly withdrawn from peer review. The word they keep using is not symbolic. It is not ritual. The word they keep using is functional. To understand why that word changes everything, you need to understand what the structure actually does. And here, we have to move carefully, because the evidence is layered, and the implications build on each other in ways that require patience. The crystalline arrangements on the surface are not random. When mapped digitally and analyzed for pattern density, they resolve into something that researchers in information theory recognize immediately. They form a base 12 numerical system, not base 10, which is what humans use today because we have 10 fingers. Not base 2, which is what computers use. Base 12. A counting system with specific mathematical properties, particularly useful for astronomical calculation, for tracking cycles of time, and for encoding large amounts of information in a compact, durable format. Base 12 appears independently in Sumerian mathematics, in ancient Babylonian astronomy, in the musical scale, in the structure of the clock you check every morning. 12 months, 12 hours, 12 inches in a foot. Cultures separated by thousands of miles and thousands of years kept arriving at the same numerical foundation. The mainstream explanation for this convergence is elegant and simple. 12 is a highly composite number. It divides evenly by 2, 3, 4, and 6. Practical minds, working independently, would naturally gravitate toward it. That's where the story shifts, because the structure in the cave does not merely use base 12. It encodes base 12 in a way that assumes the user already understands it. There is no teaching layer, no simplification, no primer. Whoever made this was not introducing the concept. They were applying it, at expert level, in stone, 12,000 years ago. Dr. Margit Voss, a mathematician at a European research university who was brought in as a consultant and has since spoken carefully but publicly about her findings, described her first analysis of the pattern density as disorienting. Her word, not mine. She said that when she ran the crystalline arrangements through standard frequency analysis, the same kind of analysis used to decode ancient writing systems, she found something she had never encountered before. The patterns are self-referential. They contain, within themselves, a key to reading themselves. Think about what that means for a moment. A truly random arrangement of crystals has no internal logic. A decorative arrangement has repetition, but no informational density. What Voss found was a structure that simultaneously encodes data and encodes the instruction set for decoding that data. In computer science, this is called a self-describing system. It is not a simple thing to design. It requires an understanding of abstraction, the ability to think about thinking itself, that we do not associate with any culture 12,000 years old. She submitted her findings. The paper was returned without review. The editorial note cited insufficient archaeological context. She resubmitted to a different journal. Same result. A third attempt, to a mathematics journal, rather than an archaeology publication, was accepted and then, 3 weeks before publication, retracted at the request of an unnamed institution with advisory authority over the journal. That is not how science normally works. Science argues. Science debates. Science publishes and then tears apart. Science does not quietly erase. And yet, here is where we have to pause and think about something larger. Throughout human history, there have been moments when a discovery did not fit the story that institutions needed to be true. Not because the institutions were evil, not because there was a conspiracy of mustache-twirling villains in dark rooms, but because institutions, universities, governments, funding bodies, publishing houses, are built on frameworks. And frameworks, by definition, resist what they cannot absorb. The framework of modern archaeology is built on a progression, primitive to complex, simple to sophisticated. And that framework has done enormous good. It has organized knowledge. It has guided research. It has helped us understand an enormous amount about where we came from. But frameworks are not the same as truth. When Galileo pointed his telescope at Jupiter and saw moons orbiting a planet that was not the Earth, the framework of his time could not absorb it. Not because the evidence was weak, because the framework was strong. Strong enough to put a man on trial for looking at the sky. We tell ourselves we are past that. We tell ourselves that modern science is self-correcting, open, fearless. And in many ways, it is. But the retraction of Voss's paper, the off-the-record conversations, the careful institutional language describing something clearly extraordinary as merely symbolic, these are not the behaviors of a field that is comfortable with what it found. These are the behaviors of a field that is afraid of the question. And the question, the real question beneath all of this, is not merely archaeological. It is not about one cave in Turkey, or one unusual stone structure, or even the remarkable sophistication of a civilization that supposedly didn't exist yet. The question is about memory. Every civilization encodes its knowledge in materials designed to last. We use silicon and server farms. The Romans used stone and papyrus. The Sumerians used clay. Whatever culture produced the cave structure used something more durable than any of these. Crystalline lattices inside stone, protected from decay for 12 millennia, still legible, still structurally intact, still functional. They were not writing for themselves. The encoding system is far too complex, far too abstract for casual use. They were writing for someone they knew would come later, someone they knew would be capable of reading it. They were writing for us. Or, and this is the possibility that sits at the very edge of this entire discussion, the one that researchers approach and then retreat from, they were writing for someone they expected, someone whose arrival they had calculated in a base 12 system across a timeline that stretched forward from their present into our past. The site has now been partially sealed. Access is restricted. A small international research team has been granted limited time with the structure under conditions that include a non-disclosure agreement covering any findings for a period of 5 years. 5 years is an unusual time frame. It is not long enough to be permanent, but it is exactly long enough to outlast the current news cycle. Exactly long enough for the initial shock to fade. Exactly long enough for the question to go quiet. Whether it stays quiet is a different matter. Because the crystalline structure in the cave is not, it turns out, entirely unique. In the months since the original discovery, through the quiet, unofficial channels of academic correspondence that flow beneath the surface of institutional science, 3 other sites have been mentioned in connection with similar findings, one in the Zagros Mountains of Iran, one near the Indus River Valley, one, described only in the vaguest terms, somewhere in the highlands of Bolivia. None of these secondary mentions have been confirmed. None have been given official status, but they have been mentioned by credible researchers, in private, more than once. That's when this stops being a story about a cave. Pattern recognition is one of the things that makes human intelligence remarkable. We see patterns where none exist. That is our weakness. But we also see patterns that are real, that others have missed, and that is our strength. The pattern here, if you allow yourself to see it fully, is not just about ancient technology. It is about the consistent, systematic underestimation of human potential across time. Every generation discovers that the humans who came before them were more sophisticated than believed. Every generation is shocked, and every generation, after the shock fades, recalibrates slightly, and then draws a new line, a new minimum threshold of complexity, just far enough back in time to feel safe. And then something is found that crosses that line too. The cave structure is not the first anomaly. It is part of a sequence. The Antikythera mechanism, a fully functional astronomical computer found in a Greek shipwreck, dated to 150 years before Christ, so sophisticated that nothing comparable appeared in the historical record for another 14 centuries. The Baghdad battery, a clay jar containing an acidic solution and metal rods capable of generating electrical current, dated 2,000 years ago. The Dendera light, a carved relief in an Egyptian temple that, to a significant number of electrical engineers who have studied it, depicts with uncomfortable clarity a functioning arc lamp. Each of these was explained away. Each explanation was reasonable, plausible, and just slightly insufficient. Each was accepted because the alternative, the possibility that the arc of human history is not the smooth, upward line we have drawn, was too disruptive to absorb. The cave structure is different in one crucial respect. It is not a mechanical device that could have been stumbled into by accident. It is not an artistic coincidence that resembles technology. It is a deliberate information system built with mathematical precision at a time when mathematical precision should not have existed. And it is addressed to a reader. We are that reader. And whatever it says, whatever is encoded in those crystalline lattices, in that base 12 language, across that stone surface, is something that someone, 12,000 years ago, decided was important enough to preserve forever. Think about what you preserve. Think about what you carve in stone, or write down, or encrypt against time. You preserve what matters. You preserve what you are afraid will be lost. You preserve warnings, instructions, records of what happened, so that whoever comes after will understand. We do not yet know what the structure says. The decoding work, to the extent that it continues under the current access restrictions, is slow. It may take years. It may take decades. It may, if the institutional pressure continues, never be fully published. But the structure exists. The mathematics are real. The self-referential encoding is real. The base 12 system is real. Dr. Voss's analysis is real, whether or not it appears in a journal. And the quiet, uncomfortable fact that multiple researchers have independently used the word functional, that is real too. Here is what we know, gathered and laid flat. We know that human beings were building sophisticated ritual complexes at the edge of the last ice age. We know that base 12 mathematics appears across ancient cultures with a consistency that simple parallel evolution does not fully explain. We know that a structure exists in a Turkish cave that encodes numerical information in a self-describing crystalline system, verified by a credentialed mathematician, and that the institutional response to that verification has been silence, restriction, and retraction. We know that the current access restrictions carry a 5-year non-disclosure timeline. We know that 3 other potential sites have been quietly mentioned, and we know that none of this proves a grand narrative. The honest position, the intellectually rigorous position, is that we are looking at something we do not yet understand, being managed by institutions that are not yet ready to explain it. That is enough. That is already remarkable, because it means the story is not closed. It means that the version of human history we were handed in school, in textbooks, in the clean upward arc of civilization, that version has a door in it. A door that opens onto something older, something more complex, something that was waiting in a cave for 12,000 years for someone to crouch down and look. The story has been handed to us across 12,000 years of geological time, preserved in crystal and stone, waiting. The question is not whether we are capable of reading it. The question is whether we are willing to. This channel exists because of that door. The Vault of Secrets is not about conspiracy. It is not about fear. It is not about tearing down what we know. It is about the disciplined, patient, fearless pursuit of what we don't know yet. It is about asking the questions that the textbooks don't ask, looking at the evidence that the press releases minimize, sitting with the uncomfortable possibility that the story of humanity is larger, stranger, and more extraordinary than we have been told. If that is the kind of thinking that interests you, if you believe that intellectual courage matters more than intellectual comfort, then you are exactly where you belong. Join the Vault of Secrets. Not because we have all the answers, but because we are committed together to asking better questions. Subscribe. Stay close. Because the next discovery is already waiting. Somewhere in the ground, in the dark, in the silence before someone crouches down and sees something that shouldn't be there. The cave is open. The crystal is waiting. And the story of who we are and who came before us is far from over.